In the near future, an experiment gone wrong causes plants to start growing at high speeds and gain mild intelligence. They begin attacking animals, but soon they move on people and start taking over cities all around the world. After just 1 week, all that's left of society are ruins and shelters. 1 year later, plants occupy more than 80% of the land area. Hao and his daughter Yuan missed the last evacuation, and now they try to survive by living in the ruins. One afternoon, Yuan finds a dog that reminds her of the pet she used to own and ignores her father's warnings not to. Hal worries because the sun is about to set and the plants come out in the dark to attack, so he immediately goes after her. He finds her staring at a tree that has a bunch of bodies caught on its vines, and Hal picks Yuan up to run away. As the vines begin going after them too, they rush through the woods, and when the vines are about to catch them near the cliff, they jump onto a large truck that they use as a bridge to go back to the place they call home nowadays. Yuan wonders if she's being a troublemaker and if it had been better if her mother had survived instead of her. Hao assures her she's doing fine. Then he gives her his watch so he can keep track. Lastly, he sings the happy birthday song until she falls asleep afterward. Hal goes back to use his radio to try to find other survivors and falls asleep in the process. This causes him to miss 2 things. The plants are getting closer to the apartment and the joint forces send a message announcing a plan to reclaim Earth. Hal begins to dream about the day of the catastrophe. Yuan and his wife Ian had been stuck in traffic for hours, and Yen wouldn't take her eyes off the computer because she was very worried about her project to prevent desert. Yuan didn't mind seeing her mom working because she saw this as saving the world. Suddenly they see people running away and birds acting weirdly. Ian gets a call from her lab saying the plants they were working on began losing control. At that moment, the ground starts shaking and wounded. People scream as they reveal there's a giant vine coming after them. Back in the present, Hal wakes up when he realizes the screaming is coming from. The vines have broken through the floors and are reaching for the bed, taking it and the girl away before Hal can do anything. Yuan's still wearing the watch, so Hal wastes no time and goes back outside to track her. The signal takes him to an old building full of plants where he finds the watch on the floor. Hal moves deeper inside while using a UV light to keep any plants away and finds a body on a chair. But thankfully it's not his daughter at that moment. Hal hears Yuan scream and runs into another room where he finds her defending herself with a UV flashlight that is about to run out of batter. Hal throws his own flashlight at her, then tosses a piece of furniture to distract the vines. Next, Hal approaches the window, which has been sealed. So he begins hitting it to let the sunlight in as the vines begin closing around him. Hal finds a fire extinguisher on the floor and throws it at the window, finally creating a hole big enough that allows sunlight to get inside and scare the plants away. The vines drop Hal and he hits his head when he falls on the floor, causing him to have more flashbacks. On the day of the catastrophe, Yen made the family return to the lab so she could pack up her. It was this testing that caused the plants to evolve in the first place. But Yen thought she could modify the formula to weaken the plants and at least make them weak to sunlight. She also pointed out that the plants were all connected to a root network. The small plants in the lab were starting to react as well, and suddenly a wall crumbled to reveal giant vines that captured Ian. Hal grabbed her hands and tried to pull her back, but more vines appeared through the door and grabbed Yuan. So Ian told Hal to let her go and save their daughter instead. In the present, Hal wakes up to discover the plants are trying to. Suddenly a UV grenade falls on the floor and lights up the room, followed closely by Soldier Limo, who immediately cleans up the main vines and rescues Hal. Now the entrance is clear, the rest of her team comes in and joins the fight against the plants. They all have plenty of weapons, including a flamethrower. And while most of the team opens, Firelay begins activating the UV irradiator. However, a vine takes him away and 21 has to take over. Even if he doesn't know how the radiator works, Captain Feng is almost grabbed too, but Yuan saves him by pointing her flashlight at the. Hal notices 21 is having trouble and quickly joins him to offer his technical knowledge. The radiator finally activates and emits a strong light that sends all the vines away afterward. Hal thanks the team and wonders what's going on. They explain they're an operation team working for the joint force formed by all the surviving soldiers around the world to try to fight off the plants. Fang calls the base to explain their mission was delayed because the reagent they're transporting was broken, so they came to the lab in this building to fix it. Fortunately, they find the necessary pieces and quickly begin working on. While they wait, Fang shows Yuan a little magic trick, making a picture of her daughter appear from behind Yuan's ear. Unfortunately, he lost her during the catastrophe, making Fang wish she could adopt Yuan instead, which makes Hao uncomfortable. 21. And Limo explained to Hao that scientists found a huge root network underground that will end humanity when it breaks out an event they call the Green Tide. There are 54 hours left before this happens, so various teams around the world must find access to the root and inject it with Hydri reagent, which will work as a permanent plant. These predictions are based on biological signals, and Hao tries to point out Yen had discovered those signals are unstable and can't be trusted. But he isn't taken seriously. Suddenly the building begins shaking and Ain breaks the floor, bringing down the UV light and causing a few people to fall through the hole. The soldiers open fire in the darkness of the room while on the floor below Limo checks on Lei to find him severely wounded. Hao and Yuan have fallen as well, and notice a giant snake-like plant coming closer. This plant is blind and hunts by following. The reagent fell away from them and Limo needs to retrieve it. Thus, the trio decides to move as quietly as possible. Hao and Yan manage to walk over the plant's body without trouble. And once they reunite with Limo, they finally grab the reagent. But this accidentally moves some jars on the floor and makes noise. The plant turns around to go after them and the trio runs to hide behind a table. But since the plant keeps coming closer, they have no choice but to. Yan walks backward and accidentally hits a shelf that makes more noise, causing the plant to go. After her scared, Yan runs away and ends up falling. So Hao and Limo rush to put themselves between her and the plant. At that moment, Lei shows up opening fire on the plant. And when the monster catches him, he tells the trio to run before activating a grenade to bring down the plant with him. The force of the explosion forces the trio and the reagent out of the building, and shortly afterward, the rest of the team join. Because of Lei's sacrifice, they don't have anyone to handle the reagent, and Fang asks Hao to be their new engineer. Hal refuses because his priority is taking care of his daughter. Goi is furious because he sees how he's selfish and Fang points out that if he doesn't come, they'll die anyway. But Hao is firm on his decision. Limo cuts in and says they should let him go, admitting she remembers what it was like to lose her brother. The team begins going away and Yuan announces she wants to join them because her mother would have wanted her to help save the world. Now Hao has no choice but to come along. As the group walks through the city, they come across a broken Ferris wheel, and Hao tells Yuan that's where he had his first date with Ian, promising to take Yuan to an amusement park after they save the world. This inspires Stone to ask Jing on a date after they save the world too. But Jing turns him down. Stone doesn't give up and gives her a special good luck charm that his mother made for him to gift his future wife, but doesn't want it either, and tosses it back to him. Moments later, the weather starts changing again and all the birds in the area fly. 21 receives a message from another team announcing the green tide is coming earlier than expected, confirming Hao's point that the biological signs couldn't be trusted as an earthquake hits the area. A building starts to fall and the group runs away just in time to avoid being hit. At that moment, the green tide finally appears, although 21 points out, this is just the beginning. The group immediately begins running and finds a bus where they can hide. But Stone falls behind when he is hit by a falling. The earthquake opens a rift in the ground and Stone now can't rejoin the team. So he runs as close as possible to the edge and throws the reagent at Jing. Before the plants kill him, Limo has to come and grab a grieving Jing to drag her to the bus. But a vine stops her by grabbing her Uncle House, saves her by cutting the vine with a machete, and the group finishes entering the bus right before the earthquake, and the vines begin tossing the vehicle all over the place. The team has to be careful to protect the reagent and to grab onto each other until they're all strapped to there. The pushing of the vine sends the bus flying off a cliff. But fortunately, the vehicle crashes against a building and gets stuck on the window, allowing the group to get off safely. The team takes a moment to cry for Stone, especially when Jing notices he left the charm on the reagent. As a final goodbye, Fang notices he hurt his hand during the bus escape, and Yuan thanks him for his protection by giving him a bandage. Then Fang tries to contact the base to warn them about the early tide, only to discover they're cut off. They need a signal booster. Luckily, there's a tower across the. To reach it, they'll have to cross a flimsy bridge that connects both buildings. The group begins walking across the bridge very carefully, which includes having to sneak around a huge hole. 21 slips. But fortunately, he manages to hold onto the metal beams and keeps on moving by crawling. Suddenly a building nearby begins crumbling, and while it doesn't hit the team, its false ends an air blast that pushes Yuan off the bridge. Fang reacts fast and using a grappling hook, he jumps to grab her before she hits the. Hal tries to pull them up, but the weight is too much and the bridge won't hold on for much longer. So Fang decides to do his final magic trick after telling Limo she's in charge now. He connects Yuan to the rope, and then lets go to disappear into the abyss. Other buildings around them are starting to collapse as well. The team who's into the tower and Hal pulls Yuan up to join them, throwing the girl at the soldiers before the bridge finally collapses too. For a moment, the team thinks they lost him, but Hal manages to hold on to the edge of the window, and Limo immediately pulls him. Minutes later, the team finds the main comms room and Hal fixes the generator to get power running again. 21 connects his computer and contacts the base, but when Limo tries to inform them of the early tide, the commander reveals they already knew about it because all the other teams are having the same trouble. According to their new calculations, they only have 4 hours left while the team discusses how to proceed. A message from the High Command of the Joint Forces begins broadcasting to the entire. He explains their scientists have discovered the root network has created a protective barrier on its periphery using underground plants and microorganisms, meaning their reagent won't be able to penetrate it. Since nuclear weapons aren't an option either, because Earth can't withstand the effect anymore, they've decided to cancel the mission. 21 uses an egg to explain how the protective barrier works to his team, which gives Hao an idea. He takes over the conversation and gives the world a heartful speech about all the loved ones that they've lost so far, and the promises he's made to his daughter on her birthday, begging for one more. The commander decides to let the teams vote, and immediately all soldiers and bases around the world agree to try to finish the mission even if the chances of winning are extremely low. Limo's team leaves the tower and crosses the city to reach the launch station, which contains a gigantic drill. The green tide is coming closer, so the team rushes to connect the reagent to the drill and send it underground. Unfortunately, the scientists were right and the drill can't break the barrier. The same thing happens to other teams around. The plants begin attacking the stations and jam communications, and a sudden noise announces the neighboring volcano is getting active. Limo explains, "This station is powered by this volcano's geothermal energy through 4 sets of maintenance systems underground," and How points out the volcano's magma could be used to destroy the barrier. 21 finds a map of the station on the system, and Gui finds a box of explosives. Thus, they agree to enter through the main access point and blow up the whole maintenance system. Hal volunteers to go as well because he's the only one that knows how to handle. Ewan begins crying, and Hal promises her he'll be back soon. Gui, Limo, and Hal take the elevator to the access point, which 21 unlocks from the computer. They can feel the heat as soon as they arrive, but when they enter the corridor, they discover is full of plants. The trio immediately begins fighting, and in the struggle, Gui drops the bomb, accidentally causing it to start the detonation countdown. Avine grabs Hal's leg and Limo cuts it off. But now Hal's hurt and she has to help him. As the two of them move back, Gui decides to follow Lei's sacrificing example, letting the plant capture him to activate a grenade and bring it down with him, while teams all over the world give up and wait for the green tide to take them. Hal and Limo reach the maintenance system. Hal sends Limo to find something to break the door lock, but as soon as she leaves him, Hal opens the door with one of his tools and locks it from the other side. Limo tries to open the door, reminding him this is her task, but Hal only asks her to take care of Yuan before running away with. Crying her heart out, Limo runs back to the elevator and reunites with the others to bring the bad news. The vines continue to make the whole area shake and falling. Debris knock out for a few seconds, but he's woken up by a new broadcast that tells humanity goodbye. Hal can't let that happen. So he drags his body to the final room in the maintenance system and uses the security camera to say goodbye to Yuan, who is crying and saying she doesn't want her dad to save the world anymore. At that moment, the bomb explodes and allows the magma to come in, effectively breaking the reagent finally gets drilled into the root network, causing the plant to begin collapsing all over the world. As humanity begins celebrating, the team leaves the station to watch the plant die. And Ewan reminds everyone that this tragedy was a warning for people to start treating the planet better. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.